Okay, so at this moment we can open our eyes if they are closed, or we can leave them closed. It's up to you. We can become aware that we are here together in community, and we are here for this purpose of understanding the body and mind, understanding reality more deeply, more fully. Okay? And to get the most benefit, to get the most depth and truth out of our experience when it comes to these teachings, it's highly recommended that you rely on a sense of listening from experience, listening from the heart, listening from the body, rather than getting caught up in the intellectual mind. Now, that's not to say that you should just believe what you hear, but rather to listen deeply from your experience rather than from complicated thought. Okay, so we're just going to read today. Usually at this time, we've been having our Buddha book club where we read quite a bit each day of this book, The Art of Disappearing from Ajahn Brahm. But today we're going to take a little bit of a different approach, and that is that we're going to read just one section, and then we're really going to look at it closely, to sit with it, to discuss it, to explore it to the best of our abilities, and just see how we get along in practicing it that way. Regardless, you can take each and every moment of this time as a time to practice, as a time to be in community, and as a time to rely on just breathing, just being aware, rather than story, thought, past, future. Okay? So the short section that I will read today, and you can get a copy of this book somewhere in the Discord if you really want to have it in front of you. But the short section we'll be reading today is called Allowing the You to Disappear. Allowing the you to disappear. So in Buddhism, we have this particular idea that there is no permanent fixed self. That the story about yourself, okay, the story that you have a bit of a technical difficulty here. The story that you have about yourself, your past, your future, the world, is not solid, not fixed, not permanent. One moment here. Okay. So in the Western idea of dealing with suffering, a lot of times we are working with a certain perspective about how you fix the self or how you analyze the self in a certain way so that you are no longer burdened by it or conflicted by it. But in Buddhism, as a major part of the philosophy, we have this understanding that reducing suffering and becoming enlightened or becoming truly at peace and happy is about calming this self-fixation, being less selfish. Okay? That this self is not actually a puzzle that you can solve, because it is not really fixed and permanent in the way that we imagine it to be, but rather that it's kind of a fluid, changing, a dynamic experience that is always based on the present moment. Okay, so in Buddhism, we wouldn't give more weight or more importance to the sensations than when we rub our fingers together like this, right? We can feel some sensations there. We wouldn't give more weight or more reality to our sense of our story and our past and our future than we would these sensations of rubbing our fingers together like that. The sensations are impermanent. Your idea about yourself is impermanent and always changing. Okay, so the practice of developing on the path in Buddhism is about allowing the self to disappear, to dissolve, to become less fixed, less tight, less knotted up. And therapy can be very helpful in that. But here we'll be particularly talking about a meditative approach. So this section, allowing the you to disappear. In terms of meditation, ending suffering, always remember that it is not that you can do it. It's that you aren't getting in the way. So when we show up here and practice together, it's not that you are doing it, it's that you are not getting in the way. The process happens when you disappear. Meditation starts to deepen, to open up. The real benefits that come from meditation start to happen when you disappear. When you are demanding, you are there. When you have ill will, you are there. When you have craving, you are there. When you have boredom, you are there. All these things create a sense of self that thinks it owns things and gets involved. You are the problem. So we come together here to put ourselves down, not to beat ourselves up, but to let go of our self-fixation. Let go of our constant practice of selfishness. To get out of our own way. You are the problem. And you can't just go somewhere else. Wherever you go, you take you with you. So everyone should disrobe. Take off that I garment, that I identification. That which you take yourself to be, that sense of self, should leave and vanish. Or at least don't take it too seriously. When the sense of you disappears, there is no ill will or desire, because they are part of the ego and the illusion of self. Then there can only be contentment and peace. So when we let go of this, trying to solve the puzzle of ourself, fixating on ourself, me, my, mine, I don't like that, I want that. When the sense of you disappears, there is no ill will or desire, because they are part of the ego and the illusion of the self. It's not that there doesn't appear to be a self. There certainly appears to be a self. It's very convincing that there is a self, right? When a real character in the story of our lives, in the same way that movies are exceedingly convincing. Especially when you go to a movie theater and the lights are off, or it's a 4K, Ultra HD, HDR, high definition movie. It's very, very convincing, but it's an illusion. It's a phantasm. It's not actually what's happening. So when that ego, when that illusion of the self calms, relaxes, settles, right? When we take ourselves less seriously, when we're less worked up, then there can only be contentment and peace. So when we put our selfishness down and our strong belief in I, me, mine, I like that, I don't like that, and that's the way that things are, when we put that down, when we let that settle, there is contentment and peace, being satisfied with what we have at this moment. We'll now go into a story that Ajahn Brahm tells here. When I was a kid, I was a Cub Scout. We used to get all these badges for things. A badge for being able to make a cup of tea, a badge for being able to light a fire. And that is what many people do on retreats, on meditation retreats. They want a badge for getting jhana. That is, they want a badge for having a deep meditation experience, a badge for becoming a stream winner. It just means you have a certain degree of enlightenment, a certain degree of wisdom that you reach. But there are no badges on the Buddhist path. On the contrary, we are trying to get rid of all those badges. Whatever it is we think we are, so we can just disappear. When you're restless, just disappear. When you are tired, just disappear. When you feel hot or you feel cold, just disappear. When you disappear, everything becomes nice and peaceful. When you're bored, ask, who's being bored anyway? Just disappear and the boredom will vanish. Okay, so I'm going to try to put this text in the voice chat channel so that it can be easily read. And I want us to really try and discuss this and work through this and see what we have that comes to mind about it and unpack it together. And as you are doing that, of course, you're welcome to fully rely on just breathing and being aware, taking this as a kind of active meditation of sorts. Okay, so I'm going to post that text in the voice text channel so that you should be able to see it. There we go. That's the first part. This is the second part. Now, oftentimes in this kind of situation, there's a silence, and that silence is correct. I mean, we're here to be embracing each other in silence and stillness, okay? So, if there's a feeling of awkwardness or I should say something or whatever like that, just be with it and feel that stillness. Practice just breathing and just being aware, okay? So go ahead and take a look at that text there. And if you have questions, something to share, something you're inspired about, please don't be shy. Feel free to ask, to share.
see something in the first two sentences that was with me for a long while. It's not phrased exactly that way here, but there is this thing about not getting in your own way, right? So there, at least linguistically, there are two U's there, right? And from what I can tell, um, this might or might not be true for you, but
It's a little bit difficult
it's
to
like
hear you, Josh. Your microphone's a little bit low.
fixing. Yeah, with not getting in your own way, I think there's the you that is getting in the way is the you that you get when you say I am, right? Because then you're defining yourself and you're stressing yourself by creating that story through speaking. You're you're limiting yourself by putting it into speech. And I was wondering how um, when you do a silent retreat, right, and you start speaking, you find that the person speaking isn't necessarily you, or it's a limited version of yourself, because the you that you have in the silent retreat is something much bigger. Here is that again there is this there's a problem of speaking of these things because you have to speak about it.
Well, this
But
is
that
the
is
thing, is that we need to recognize that these are deep teachings coming from a very deep place. Your like meandering thoughts or meandering ideas about it is largely irrelevant. So the practice is more to question and to clarify and to find out more deeply about what is being pointed to here. We don't want to use these kinds of teachings to lift up or to empower our wandering thoughts, our general kind of trying to figure out, but to really clarify what is being said more and more specifically, more and more directly, because all of this is pointing to experience, not a philosophy that has been developed through thinking. So any philosophical kind of perspective that you bring about relying on thinking is largely irrelevant when it comes to these teachings. That's that you that needs to be allowed to disappear. But when we try to look into, to clarify specifically, and that's why we have the text right here, so we can look closely at it and ask, well, what did Ajahn Brahm mean by this? This really sticks out to me, right? What was meant by this text? And we have a lot of people here who can share their insight about it. But it's very important to know that all of this is coming from a deep, direct experience, not from the intellect, not from thinking. So we have to use our attention in a very pointed way to get the benefit from it. Otherwise, we will just think ourselves in circles, and that's that you that's being talked about that needs to be let to disappear, rather than the looking itself.
May I?
Okay, Anna, go ahead.
I understand it as like the self, well, me and you and everyone. We should stop seeing it as solid. Everything, this will, boredom, cravings are projections. So it's like disengaging from it, from this solid self, because it's dependent on everything else. I don't know if I understand it early.
I think that's a very good point. So the solidity that we give to the self is kind of just a game that we play. We only exist in this moment. You know, this quote unquote self only exists at this moment in relation to the environment, in relation to so many factors that we couldn't say are me or mine, right? Is the chair that I'm sitting in me? Is the temperature in the room that allows me to still be alive me? Um, so all of these factors are going together. Maya, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think reflecting on it, I think what you said about trying not to let meandering thoughts kind of calm down this instant connection that I was trying to make between the idea of Western psychology, the idea of a sense of self, and what Buddhism tries to do in eradicating a sense of self. And I was just calming down into the teaching and thinking about the times when I have responded from the past rather than responding to what is happening in front of me, and thinking how, or feeling how useful it could be to just respond to the fresh moment rather than have all of these kind of associations or clingings or things like that happen. I suppose it was just a reflection more than anything to try and sort of put my ideas aside and to think about um, how the teaching feels, and how I can relate to it without thinking too much about it.
Yeah, how fresh can we get? Right? How fresh and clear and open and transparent can we become at this moment? I think for me, as someone who, you know, gives teachings and does these, you know, people ask me for advice and all this. The best advice that I give always comes from a place of freshness. And I noticed, you know, when you said that, it really spoke to me because I noticed that feeling of when someone's saying something and then it reminds me of a past experience or a past idea that I've had. And I kind of, I don't know, it turns out to be like a discounted answer because I'm relying on this boxed in self that I've worked myself up in. I'm attached to that rather than this really allowing the you to disappear and just listening and just responding at that moment, just experiencing what's happening right now. Thank you for the reflection. How about Christina? What are you thinking over there, Christina?
Well, I'm thinking a lot of things, and if I should do this, I have to erase everything that I've learned in my life up till now. And I don't know how it's possible for me in my life with work and studies and all that. I don't really know how to do this. I'm rather confused, really.
Yeah. So this is the analogy that comes up. This is the story that comes up for me, Christina. So you're sitting at your computer, okay, your phone, what have you, and you've got some technical difficulties going on, right? You've got someone, this is a story, not you in particular, but someone, they're sitting in front of their computer and they have a technical difficulties that come on. And they say, well, I've got to erase this whole thing. I've got to throw this computer away. It doesn't work anymore, right?
Mm.
Another option is to just restart the computer, to refresh it. And a lot of times that solves a lot of these confusions, a lot of these problems. So we're not erasing anything here. We are recognizing that that which we imagine to be erasable was never solid in the first place. It was never really written down in the first place. It seems to be written down, but that's not actually the way that it is. In some way, we can say that there is this karma or this cause and effect that is linked together, okay? And that is somehow written down in our DNA, you can say. But that is so vastly more subtle, more refined. Think about how much more subtle the DNA is, the genetic code of your DNA is in terms of who you are, okay, and what you're experiencing right now, and all the memory in that DNA versus the story that you've kind of built up about your life and who you are and who you should be and who you shouldn't be and bad and right and wrong and all this. So it's more that we allow ourselves to understand that it's not written down in the way that we think it is. And so we allow that kind of selfishness, that you-ness, to relax and to kind of get out of the way. And then we find that, yeah, this ability to refresh and restart, to clear, is very accessible for us, but not through our force. It's actually by getting out of our own way. So you don't have to erase anything. It wasn't permanent in the first place. It wasn't permanent marker. It was written in dry erase. It was written on a dry erase board, and it's raining outside. And the dry erase board, I don't know if you know dry erase board, but it's all falling apart. Dry erase board is like a whiteboard, like a plastic whiteboard, and there's markers where you can write on it, and then you can rub it off.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Okay. Yeah.
it's not permanent like we think that it is. It's very temporary, it's very changing, it's very fluid. And so it's not to erase anything, it's to take these moments to get out of our own way, to refresh and restart, and to do good deeds, to help, to offer. It's not a certain kind of extremism. It's not rejecting anything, but it's to prioritize this restart and this refresh. And when you do that, you find, my anxiety, my depression, my story, my past, my future is not as solid as I imagine it to be. Even my habit, right? My problems, the bad things that I do, the good things that I do are not as solid, not as fixed as they can seem to be.
But I think you say you shouldn't think about the self, but you should care about yourself. You should love yourself and be gentle to yourself. It's I don't really.
Well, let's say you've got a little baby, sweet baby, right? That baby doesn't need you to think about it. That baby needs to be held, needs to be cared for, needs to be fed. Okay? Doesn't need to be thought about. Thought as a tool to manage and to help that situation, sure. But the actions, the doing of caring for yourself or caring for that child or expressing kindness, patience, generosity, none of this is really expressed through thought. You can sit down and you can think as fast and as big and as hard and as strong as you want to. It's not going to hold a baby. So we give too much weight to our thinking, this me, my, mind-centered thinking. But if we use thoughts for compassionate intentions, for compassionate aspirations, then that's wonderful. But we still shouldn't be too self-identified with them or take them too seriously, because we can't control them and because they're not permanent, they're not fixed, and they have a very limited capacity as to what they can do.
I should put down the thought and feel more, or
It's, I mean, there might be something here that's more specific that I couldn't speak about, but it's, yeah, it's to detach from thinking and do good deeds. So if your thought supports you, encourages you to do good deeds, or to show up here and meditate, or to start taking care of your life more and more, then that's great. That's right thought. Okay, that's right thinking. But the thought itself is not doing it. Okay, and actually the beneficial practices, feeding the baby, right, is not thought. Showing up here and meditating is not thought. Getting in the shower, enjoying the shower, right? Or you're going to stink if you don't take a shower. That's not thought, right? Getting clean in the shower and the enjoyment that goes with the shower as well. That's not thought. So there's a certain way to use our thinking that supports us to continue walking the path and to continue detaching from thought, but especially detaching from this constant sense of a I, me, mine, self.
Well, thank you. I don't think I will figure this out tonight, but perhaps one day.
Well, just let it go. Get out of your own way. Right?
Okay.
Yeah. Allow the you to disappear. Yes. Thank you.
Okay.
How about anyone who, yeah?
I was wondering if I could speak again.
Okay, Anna.
It's really quick. Maybe it's like disengaging from what we think we are, because that thing we think we are is not really what we are. Because as we were saying before, it is not solid. I mean, I'm not just a daughter or a sister or a teacher or whatever. I am something else, and that else is the real non-self that I cannot express in words. So when we try to think about who we are and what we are and put all these words together to figure it out, we are just stepping apart from what we are. So we need to detach from all these conceptions and words to define the self. I don't know if I say what I was trying to say, but that was it.
Well, I don't know that either, but that sounds great. That sounds really wonderful. Thank you for sharing that, Anna. Sounds right to me.
Hi, may I?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have to agree with Anna because I also thought about the same thing, because in the last couple of months I tried to work on myself really hard, especially after, yeah, let's say not so easy and beautiful months that I had last summer. And that's where I also learned that you yourself actually are not the things that you believed all these years, and that I did put myself a lot of limitations by thinking these things. Like, for example, if somebody tells you that you don't have any patience, or that you get angry easily, or that you have a huge temperament. And that is the things that, if people tell these things to you, and if you also tell these things to yourself every day, then you start to believe them and you act on them, even if you don't want to. Then kind of this war in your head starts. You are doing something that you actually don't want to do, but you do it automatically because you think you are this person and you can't change it. And that's why I would also like to say that Anna said it really beautifully, and she put it like in really good words, that like the solving this character is also like working on it, trying to do the things that you actually want to do and that you actually want to pursue, maybe. Like, for example, being like having a lot of patience, responding with love instead of like hate, or having this ill will, if you understand what I mean.
Okay. Thank you, you, and welcome. I can see you're new here. Yeah, Maya.
I think some other feelings that I was having. In terms of like getting stuck in your own head and the narratives that you create about yourself, and then you perpetuate the same kind of actions again and again because you have this idea that you have of yourself that I am the person who does this in this situation, or I'm the person who reacts like that. You know, it's similar to what you were saying about how, you know, if you condition yourself to you know, have this idea about yourself, then you'll keep self-perpetuating it. And I kind of had been kind of this idea bubbling up, and how trauma gets stored in the body, and it kind of conditions your responses to certain actions because you remember certain things that feel a similar way or make you remember a particular way. Is it kind of similar to what I was alluding to earlier on? But yeah, it's definitely a process of kind of trying to sit with that feeling in the present moment and remember that you're in the present moment rather than getting flooded into the past, which is something that can happen through trauma. Yeah, is I think just feeling the wisdom of Buddhism as a way to overcome suffering, like deep suffering that can very much condition you to perpetuate the same patterns again and again. I think that is kind of what samsara is, isn't it? It's just perpetuating the same kind of conditioned responses to life, going through it again and again. And how do you make more choices available to yourself? Is accepting what the present moment is and seeing what choices there are in this freshness of the present moment, rather than perpetuating the same responses that you yourself have, right? I think, if I'm understanding that correctly.
Yeah, that's a refresh and a restart, right? And when we train in meditation, when we practice together at these certain times for formal meditation, we're building up our mindfulness. We're empowering ourselves to do exactly that, to know what's happening right now. And then when we find ourselves in that situation, maybe it's conditioned by trauma, maybe it's conditioned by just a habit that we've developed, we say, wait a minute, oh, I can do this. I don't need to be afraid, or I don't need to do this actually. And over time, when we do that, we get better at doing that because our mindfulness is able to grow and grow. It doesn't get covered up by these big mistakes or these big habits that perpetuate this sense of self, right? So our mindfulness gets brighter, it gets stronger, and we're able to move farther and farther away from these habits, this you that wants to keep reifying itself, wants to keep establishing itself as true and real and fixed and permanent. Anyone else? Maybe someone who hasn't spoken up yet?
Yeah, I have a reflection followed by a kind of a question, but I'm going to try and sort of put it together as I go. I just wanted to sort of bounce off what Maya was saying and, you know, what has been discussed so far about the kind of the sort of fixed nature of the self. And I felt in some of the practices that I've done where, you know, this kind of dissolution of that feeling has occurred, it's felt like, you know, my whole life I felt like my sense of self was a glass of water, but it was suddenly like realizing that it was in fact a river, and it's just constantly moving and bubbling, and there are new tributaries all the time, and, you know, some of the streams end and things like that, and it's just, you know, it's not a thing. It's not a thing, and it becomes reified because it's sort of a series of patterns that we just continuously execute until, you know, until that illusion is broken. And I mean that's kind of the experience that I've had. The limited, sorry, my dog's playing with his toy. The limited experience that I've had of this feeling, and kind of from that, I guess, is the question of how can one sort of avoid striving for that, because it's incredibly tempting to feel like you're moving towards something, and especially if it's something that you feel like you've quote unquote reached before, and, you know, it's so easy to kind of be in a meditation and then suddenly there's a very subtle kind of stream of thought and you don't even realize that it's there. Is there, you know, is there sort of, I guess, a way of practicing that can make that become less and less of a temptation? Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Moss, for your reflection. So it's really about how we approach the practice. And if we're approaching in this way, like, and we're meditating and we're practicing in this way to emphasize refreshing and restarting rather than getting to a point, then it should manage itself. It should work itself out. In the end, it's much better that we are striving for this kind of development, right? And so we can live in a way that is supporting us in virtue and goodness, right? We can follow precepts. We can be mindful in our daily life. And that's just going to support us to be happier and more peaceful. But to get these deeper states of meditation, I mean, it doesn't do any good to desire, whether that's a state of meditation or otherwise. So emphasize, refresh, restart. For me, it's one of those things I haven't had such an issue with, because I don't like to have a goal. I don't like to have like a level or a certain kind of experience that I'm trying to reach or to get to. I feel a sense of exclusivity that I just reject. I have a very Zen perspective about, you know, what is a truth, what is enlightenment, what is this waking up, and that it's not some special experience. So you don't need to chase after that special experience, because that's not it. It's just something that happens naturally when you practice with an open heart, and a lot of compassion, a lot of gentleness, and a lot of allowing the you to disappear. But what does sometimes come up for me is this feeling of just a general sense of striving to improve, you know, striving to become more woke in some way, or to become a version of myself that is more ideal, right? It's not so much like this meditation state that I want to get, but a more ideal version of myself. And the answer to that is ease and joy, contentment, and a real contentment with what you have right now. And to turn back to that and to enjoy that, because contentment is really wonderful. It's really enjoyable. It's really peaceful. It's warm to feel contented, to feel satisfied with who you are and what you are right now. Yeah, and we will, we'll be humbled one way or another. We will refresh and restart one way or another. But it's much better that I feel it's much better that we refresh and restart, that we be humbled as we aspire to become more skillful, rather than giving into, these past desires and these past difficulties. And a part of that practice, that aspiration of becoming more skillful, is to become more content. Right? So it's a refresh and a restart on its own, to become more satisfied with what we have right now. And those states of experience are not really to be sought after. People spend years and years in meditation and doing retreats and things, seeking after some kind of experience. Maybe they get it, maybe they don't, but they don't develop wisdom because their whole thing is seeking for this experience. And wisdom comes by a deep experience of non-seeking, non-chasing. And that's also how those states arise. That's how those states come up. But if you're approaching it by seeking, and you just happen to get lucky, and you kind of work your hands to the bone with your meditation, so eventually you fall apart and you experience that state, you've still habituated yourself to seeking and chasing after that special experience. So you've worked up all this karma of not being content, all this kind of intentional effort of chasing, and that's not going to do you any good. So refresh, restart, and practice a deep contentment with what you have right now, and to embody, this is enough. For me, this is enough. I don't need to get better. I don't need to improve. I don't need to go and use some substance. I don't need to go and run down some alleyway and try to find some kind of intense experience. This is enough. This is okay. Christina, you want to say something?
No, it's well, no, I don't want to say something. No.
Okay. So at this time, I'm going to read the text that we wrote before, that we read before, and then we'll just sit together for a few minutes and practice to be content, to breathe and be aware, and then we'll finish up for today. Okay? So listen deeply with your know you. Allowing the you to disappear. Always remember that it is not that you can do it. It's that you aren't getting in the way. The process happens when you disappear. When you are demanding, you are there. When you have ill will, you are there. When you have craving, you are there. When you have boredom, you are there. All these things create a sense of self that thinks it owns things and gets involved. You are the problem, and you can't just go somewhere else. Wherever you go, you take you with you. So everyone should disrobe. Take off that I garment. Take off that I outfit. That which you take yourself to be, that sense of self should leave and vanish. When the sense of you disappears, there is no ill will or desire. Because they are part of the ego and the illusion of self. Then there can only be contentment and peace. When I was a kid, I was a Cub Scout. We used to get all these badges for things. A badge for being able to make a cup of tea, a badge for being able to light a fire. And that's what many people do in their meditation. They want a badge for getting a deep experience, a badge for becoming semi-enlightened. But there are no badges on the Buddhist path. On the contrary, we are trying to get rid of all those badges. Whatever it is we think we are, so we can just disappear. When you're restless, just disappear. When you're tired, just disappear. When you disappear, everything becomes nice and peaceful. When you are bored, ask, who's being bored anyway? Just disappear and the boredom will vanish. So let's disappear together for a few moments. Just breathing, just being aware, just disappearing. May we all be well, happy, and peaceful. And may we all support each other to walk the path, to grow, to be at peace, to heal our sufferings, to experience joy and freedom. May it be so. May it be so. May it truly be so. Okay, dear friends, thank you all very much for joining. I hope to see you all again soon. It would be very nice if we can make a habit of filling up the Discord. It's really nice when we have so many people here and we all stay for the full period. And very grateful for you all, grateful for your practice, and see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Bhante. Thank you all.
Thank you. See you
Thank
guys.
you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.
It's cold. Very welcome.